Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Spiritual Journey podcast. We're on episode 146. Again, sounds crazy to me, but I always like starting by saying thank you. I feel very blessed with this podcast. All the people it's reaching. When I started it, my objective was really to guide people on their spiritual journey, to simplify spirituality, and I really feel grateful for all the DMs and messages I get on a weekly basis. The people it's reaching. So thank you. Actually, this episode came from a DM I received. I request to talk about this topic wasn't from a DM I received, so thank you. But before we begin, I always love to introduce my co-host, introducing the amazing, the stunning, the healer extraordinaire, and beautiful Stacey Brown. Stacey, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, friends. So good to be here again. This podcast is a joy, and it's something that we really look forward to. My name is Stacey. I am an intuitive. I do readings for people from around the world. I'm also an Akashic record reader and podcast co-host, spiritual coach and mentor, and a recently published author. My book, Journey to Soul Center, Discovering the Gift of Surrender, is available on Amazon and Audible. If you haven't checked it out, please do check it out. It's a powerful story about my journey and then my journey with my son and some significant life lessons that I learned. So if you haven't checked it out, let me know.
Thank you, Stace. Hi, everybody. I'm Nimesh. I'm also an Akashic record reader, Akashic trainer, podcast host, podcast creator, as well as a spiritual coach and mentor. And I spent many years in the corporate world. I only left beginning of this year to really focus on creating this healing business. And I love what I get to do. I get to guide people to shine their light. I really do feel so many of us are going through so much. And I always say that whatever we need is inside us, all the love, all the answers, everything we need. But I get to guide people to be their authentic selves. So I love what I do. I feel very blessed. So this week's episode, like I said, came from a DM I received, and someone asked us to talk about the power of forgiveness and healing through letting go. Also, kind of how forgiveness is related to guilt. So I love this. Forgiveness is really a huge part of the spiritual journey, and it's really interesting. We spend a lot of time forgiving others, releasing others, maybe stuff that we've gone through in childhood and the rest of it. But forgiveness of self, in many ways, is so much more important than forgiveness of others. Because, of course, forgiveness of others and letting go, when you hold on to something, you give it power, you give it pain, you give it energy. When you forgive, you let it go. Sometimes we hold on to things but it's causing us so much pain than it is to anybody else. So, when you forgive, you do let go. And when you forgive yourself, that's so much more powerful, because we hold on to so much. And what's the connection between forgiveness and guilt? I was talking to Stacey about that before that, and really they are so deeply connected. Guilt often arises when we try and transgress this against ourselves, when we do something that we feel like we've hurt ourselves in some kind of way or hurt others. And obviously then forgiveness is the next step. They're so they're so linked, but it is so important that, guilt in itself, how does that serve you? Once something's done, you can't change it unless you've got a time machine, right? So if you can focus on the forgiveness side of it, because you're going to feel guilty, right? We're humans, we're a soul having a human experience, and the guilt typically comes down to our expectations of ourselves, our expectations of others, and the hurt that we've caused to ourselves and the hurt that we've caused to others. But, they do say forgiveness will set you free, right? And that for me is the major part of the healing journey, is really understanding, it's easy to say forgive, but you've also got to ask, well, hold on a second. What have I learned from this experience? What has it taught me? What lessons do I need to integrate? And once you've integrated those lessons, then forgiveness is part of that healing. But you've got to integrate the lessons, otherwise you may experience it again. So, Stace, when I say to you, what's the impact what's the impact that forgiveness has had on you? If you think about the power of forgiveness and healing through letting go, what does it mean to you?
So I think that forgiveness can be a really significant process and something that there is no timeline for. Some things are forgivable. You have an argument with a friend and you work through it, but other things, infidelity, etc., can leave a lasting impression that can be really hard to work through. And forgiveness for me in some instances has been a lot easier than others. But I know that through the process, I feel free. And like I remember struggling with my relationship with my parents so much and feeling a disconnect there and not knowing what to do about it and a lot of anger. And I had to go through a process of forgiving them for things that I don't know that they could have changed. And that's been a journey and a huge life lesson for me. As far as self-forgiveness, I think if you're feeling guilty for something, you need to work through it for sure. But I don't know for me recently that I can think of anything. Like there's nothing that stands out to me in this moment that I'm like, I need to forgive myself for this. I think I've been hard on myself for a lot of years. And now I'm in a season of giving myself more grace and kind of learning through the process. Whereas I think in the past, I've beat myself up for a lot of stuff. Self-inflicted guilt, for sure, and shame. And I lived that way for a really long time.
And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's, kind of the shame and the judgment we put on ourselves is really powerful. And it's interesting you talk about your parents and our blood family. And it's just, we sometimes need to remember that the people in our life, especially the blood family, we picked not necessarily to always love, but definitely to expand us. So our blood family have a way of expanding us at a deep level that really does hurt, right? It's deep, especially those people close to us, including close friends, right? But it does come down to our expectation, right? And ultimately, if you then add soul contracts to it, everyone that's close to you has some sort of soul contract with you. They're here to teach you something. They're here to expand you in some kind of way. And if we can really sit with ourselves and just ask the question, what are each of these people here to teach? Because the guilt also comes from expectations. And it's like if I think of, all the people in my life who have perceptively hurt me, it ultimately comes down to what my expectations of them were. Who decides what's right and wrong? And, that's why kind of, if you sit with yourself and say, okay, who have I hurt? Who do I need to, who do I need to forgive who's hurt me? Writing a letter to these people without actually sending it is perfect. But actually forgiveness of self, like I was saying earlier, is so much more important. It's because we have so many expectations of ourselves. I look back at my life and honestly, when I started my corporate career, my expectation was I was going to be very successful in my corporate career, and that was what I was going to do all my life. And my expectations was I was going to get married by a certain day, have kids by a certain age, and all that. Lead that program life. And ultimately, that wasn't my journey, right? My journey wasn't meant to follow the standard profile of getting married by a certain age and having kids by a certain age, even though, certainly in the Indian tradition, that would be the path I'd follow. Many years ago, I've done a lot of work on myself to realize that actually the path I chose as a soul is different to that. But there was times I'd question God and say, well, God, hold on a second. Am I not meant to have this path? Am I not meant to get married and have kids? Is that not my path? What have I done wrong? And I almost like I was judging myself. But over time, I realized that my journey is different. What my soul had to experience in this life has been different. So it's more, the first stage of any journey spiritually is awareness. And becoming aware of who you are and then accepting is the next stage. And, accept it. Before you can accept, you have to forgive. So let me ask our listeners, what have you judged yourself for? What do you see as a mistake? And then go back to what you see as that mistake and ask, what did you learn through that so-called mistake? And have you taken time to forgive yourself? And then when you think about guilt comes when we feel we've wronged somebody else. And again, it comes down to expectation. And what is right and wrong for one person could be totally different to someone else. Obviously, we all have a moral compass, right? And at some level, we know when we've hurt somebody, we know when we've caused pain, and most of us have that human sense, and we don't want to cause pain. We don't want to cause those that lie around us pain. We don't want to cause that sort of, because ultimately we love them. But who are we to stop someone else feeling pain? Because they say that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. So sometimes we have a soul contract with somebody to go through something with somebody. And it's important you sit down with yourself and really kind of understand, what is my soul contract with that person? What do I need to release, i.e. forgive? What do I really feel guilty about? And is it mine or is it somebody else's? Because that process of understanding is the journey that we need to go on, because we judge ourselves. I mean, if we had the conversations that we have in our head with friends, they won't be friends anymore. Why do we judge ourselves so much? It's because we expect more from ourselves. We expect so much more from ourselves than we do the people around us. And there's nothing wrong with that, actually. I expect more from me than I do others. But ultimately, we're also got to realize we're human and we fall, but we learn so much more from when we fall than we do when everything's going great. Of course, we don't want to manifest falling, but it's like really sitting down and journaling with understanding what you've been through, understanding how you've grown, understanding who you are because of it, will kind of help you to understand and remove the guilt. Forgiveness is a different stage, and forgiveness, maybe start by just writing a list of people who you feel you need to forgive and let go of, and then writing a list of things that you need to forgive yourself for. And then just consider each one, maybe journaling on each one. Again, as I said at the beginning, we spend so much time forgiving others as the healing process, because, a lot of the time we hold on to things when the other person's already moved on. So the only people we're causing pain to is ourselves. So what if letting it go just allows you to shine your light, because you give so much. The only thing we really have control of right now is this moment. And so the pain that we're holding on to is only causing us pain. So I highly recommend going through and listing, who do you need to forgive? Maybe go deeper on why, and then go through the process of releasing it, because you haven't got a time machine. The only thing you can focus on, what are you going to do next? And if you want to reach out to somebody and say, you know what, I'm sorry, then do it. But do it for you, not for the other person. Because again, we spend so much time on forgiving other people. But really, we need to focus on ourselves. And of course, if forgiving somebody else helps us to release that pain, then sure, of course we should do it. But we need to put ourselves at the center of our world. How do you feel about that, Stace?
I agree. I think we have to make ourselves a priority and sit with where we are in our own journey and evaluate what that looks like. And I believe that it does start with us, right? This whole process starts with us. If you can't forgive yourself, how can you forgive another? And I guess I've just lived my life that way for a really long time. So I also feel like when you impact other people, like, you also have to be true to you. And it might cause some sort of ripple effect where that person's upset with you, but you've got to also be true to yourself and do what feels right for you, knowing that if you're letting somebody down, it's because of the expectations they have on you. It's not necessarily the reality of what is.
Yeah, and that's well said. And it's also when we sit in guilt, it doesn't allow ourselves to forgive. So accepting that everything you've done and everything you've been through is part of your journey and you are exactly where you're meant to be allows you to maybe move from that guilt phase to forgiveness. Because if you sit in guilt, ultimately, when you sit in guilt, it manifests into pain. And it really does impede the process of forgiveness. So maybe really consider, why do you feel guilty? And is it because of the pain you've caused for somebody else? You can't stop somebody else feeling pain. And if you've made a mistake, so-called mistake, there's two sides to every coin, right? I mean, there's so many examples. It's, of why you might feel guilty. And normally it does come down to expectations. And I guess the question is, if you've been, maybe the relationship is a great example. If you've been in a relationship and you've been lowering your vibration, your energy, or changing who you are and molding yourself so you could be with that other person, then maybe that in itself is what causes challenges. And in the end, that's what causes problems. And you're not meeting those expectations. Maybe that's where the guilt comes from. But releasing that guilt, because guilt is one of these emotions that can really overpower you, but it doesn't allow you to move on. And kind of letting go of the guilt so you can truly forgive is a really important part of the process, because if you sit in guilt, you can't really move to forgive. And judging ourselves, and ultimately everything in your external world is a result of something in your internal world. So if you feel that you're being judged externally, and that's where the guilt is coming from, then actually know there's something inside you that needs to be healed, which is coming through on your external. It really is an interesting journey between forgiveness and guilt, because there's such a connection. But it's it's going on that journey of self-discovery to really understand who you are. Because we lead a programmed life, right? Like I was saying earlier, my expectations were to lead a fully programmed life, right? I mean, I had my own spiritual awakening, which helped me realize there's so much spiritually happening around me, and that activates the healing in me. That's such a longer story. But actually, if I hadn't gone through some of my painful experiences, the experiences that maybe I should have feel guilty about, if I hadn't gone through all of that, then I wouldn't be the healer I'm today. I mean, we were talking to a client earlier, just actually before this call, who's been through so much, and We were talking about a conversation he was having over the last few days, and without the work he's done, that some of those conversations he would have sat in guilt with. He would have sat guilty, been swamped by emotions because of conversations, but because of the work he's done, he could actually step out of the conversation almost and realize that his role was really there to allow the other person to process. And when you do this work, it really does allow you to take a deeper view of what's happening around you, because we are a soul having a human experience, which means that everything we're going through is part of the human experience. I mean, Stace, since I've known you, you've been on a roller coaster of growth. You've been through so much. There must have been times where you felt consumed by the guilt, consumed by maybe forgiving yourself. How did that feel for you?
Yeah, I definitely think that there's challenges when you're trying to be true to yourself and going through so much massive life change, because it isn't just you that's going through the life change. You're taking your kids through it, your family through it, and that has its own struggles, right? That it has its own process to unpack. I would say I'm still carrying some of that. When I, see a flash of a picture from the past or something like that, I'm like, I don't feel like I'm giving my kids the same thing, but I also feel like it wasn't it wasn't just a me decision. And so like there's a mix of guilt and kind of surrender that I have to have, right? Like there's a mix of both. And how do you forgive yourself? One day at a time, one moment at a time, one part of the process at a time. And I think a lot of it is recognizing that, yes, I made a decision, but ultimately I believe we're going to be placed exactly where we're meant to be with exactly whom we're meant to be with. Like what is meant for us is going to find us. And I'm just a big believer in that. So I think there's also like a trust factor that I have that this is part of the process. And it goes back to expectations, right? Did I expect to be married for decades? Yes. But the universe had different plans, right? Did I expect to live in a house in the country until we retired? Yes. But the universe had other plans. So I do think so much of it goes back to expectations. We think things should be a certain way. And then when they aren't, we're like, what the heck just happened? Right? But like, to me, there's got to be this radical acceptance of what is, not what we imagined there to be. And there's a difference a lot of times.
Very powerful, very powerful. And if we think about the steps of forgiveness, right? What do you need to go through? First stage is always acknowledgement. It's acknowledging how you really feel, and journaling about it, and just really kind of acceptance that maybe your expectations were met or the other person's expectations were not met. And what have you been holding on to? What pain have you been holding on to for so many years? So acknowledgement, and then understanding, your perspective, the other person's perspective, and again, understanding what everybody's expectations were, but ultimately yours. Empathy, maybe understanding things from the other person's perspective, but again, it really does come down to you and your expectations. Letting go. Are you asking yourself, am I still holding on to anger? Again, is it expectations again? Resentment? Do you have kind of a desire for revenge? Because revenge doesn't really help you, right? When we talk about practicing the pause as a technique in many of our podcasts, and as humans, we react, right? As a primal human, when you're attacked, you react, you either defend or attack back. That's a reaction. When you can practice the pause, you just breathe and you choose not to respond straight away. You breathe and then decide how you want to respond. Because response comes from the heart, or it can do. Reaction is primal, and it comes from ego. And so things like revenge, ultimately you're causing yourself pain, right? And then, then you got to make a conscious decision to forgive. It's easy for me to sit here and just say, you need to forgive. It's free will. You have a choice. So I guess the question for our listeners is, are you willing to forgive? Are you ready to forgive? And then the next stage is communication if you choose to. So you can communicate with the person if you want to have a conversation, but also you don't need to communicate. You can write a letter to the person but never send it. You can close your eyes and call in the other person's higher self and say, I want to have a conversation. And you can talk to the other person's higher self. So you don't have to if you choose not to have a physical conversation. But at least journal about it, at least write a letter if you choose to and don't post it. Some sort of communication, whether you communicate in person or spiritually, I feel is important. But then the next stage is self-forgiveness. Letting go of anything you're holding on to. And again, the technique, journaling, having that self-care routine, sitting in silence, processing, meditating, going in nature and going for a walk to allow you to process. Because just sitting around and just sitting in your pain isn't going to help. And ultimately, whatever you've been through, you've got to sit with yourself and say, what was it here to teach me? What did you learn? How have you healed? How is this your experience in this lifetime? So Stace, what are some of the things that you've done that's helped you to release the guilt, help you to forgive yourself?
I would say writing is a huge tool for me and always has been. We've talked about it so much on this podcast, but the power of journaling has been so impactful for me, whether it's that I'm writing a letter to somebody that I don't necessarily want to send or wish to send, whether it's that I'm unloading the stuff that I've faced, maybe emotions that I haven't tapped into in other places. That's been significant for me. I think the other thing is prayer. Prayer is a powerful tool that I don't think that I talk about enough. And prayer has really helped me with forgiveness of self and forgiveness of others. So both. But I always go back to writing, and I believe it's because it gives a space to be introspective without somebody else's thoughts in the way, and to see in black and white what you're actually feeling. So I would encourage our listeners to grab your journal and sit and process some of the things that maybe you haven't otherwise, right? Like, who do you need to forgive? And if you need to forgive yourself, how do you need to forgive yourself? Like, what steps do you need to take to do that? Sitting and writing is such a powerful practice.
Love it. And, it is, journaling, we hold so much in, and sometimes you need to find a way of releasing. It's like we're a volcano. We push things back, we push things down, we push things down. If you don't find a way of releasing it, eventually that's when the anger, that's when the guilt, so journaling is a great way of spiritually releasing the things that are in you via a pen and releasing on paper. So I'm actually so I'm going to include a prayer in the show notes, one that I've actually used on forgiveness for me. And I'll just read it out. Divine Spirit Source, please move me into a state of forgiveness towards anyone or anything that has hurt me, consciously or unconsciously, from the beginning of time to the present moment. I now forgive them and I release the energy of the past. Divine Spirit Source, please move me into a state of forgiveness towards myself for any hurt that I've caused others, consciously or unconsciously, from the beginning of time to the present moment. I now forgive myself and I release the energy of the past. Divine Spirit Source, please move me into a state of forgiveness towards myself for any hurt that I've caused myself, consciously or unconsciously, from the beginning of time to within the present moment. I now forgive myself and release the energy of the past. I invoke the grace and power of forgiveness to transform my body, mind, and heart as I return to the state of divine innocence. I've used that. I love it. Stace, thank you for reminding me about prayer. Otherwise, I wouldn't have thought of that. So, prayer is powerful, right? And it's that, sometimes we get lost in words, right? In human, it's like you think of prayer, you think of God, spiritual. A prayer is your way of connecting to source. For me, prayers are me communicating to source, asking for what I want. Meditation is listening. So I do believe that prayer is really an important part of what we do. And when I think about this episode, it's a bonus episode. We decided to release 2 this week. And really, the reason I decided to release 2 is I know that people love hearing me and Stacey talk, and I'm conscious that we have like 2 or 3 episodes in a row where it's me with a guest, because we're trying to get more guests on the podcast, just to get a different perspective. So I wanted you to make sure that a listener got to hear Stacey. So Stacey, as we think about this topic, and as we come into the end of the podcast, any words of advice or any journal prompts for our listeners?
Well, like I said earlier, the journal prompts, I would go back and listen to them, but I would absolutely say start with who do you need to forgive? And like Nimesh was saying, write a letter and maybe do it in your journal, knowing that you don't have to give it to them, but it's a great place for you to process it. And then if you need to forgive yourself, what do you need to forgive yourself for? And what does that look like? That's where I would start.
Nice. And I guess one of the things we should have mentioned earlier is we go deeper into these some conversations, and getting an Akashic record reading along those lines helps you to understand your journey. Helps you to understand your journey as soul level. So maybe then that allows you to understand, where does this kind of the forgiveness come from? What are your soul contracts with the people around you that maybe you caused pain to, or they've caused pain to you? And that deeper understanding maybe helps you to understand your soul journey. So by all means, book an Akashic record reading. We love doing them. Just to mention, we have our next free Zoom healing call on the 20th. It's again, you get to experience me and Stacey in a 90-minute session on Zoom. You can be on camera or don't have to be on camera. The only part of it we record is any meditation or any channeling that me and Stacey do. So normally we would I'll do a meditation of soul and soul, and we'll open the Akashic records and share a group message. That part of it is recorded. You may have heard a previous podcast episode, but the rest of it is confidential. So we don't share it. It's an open, conscious conversation, around things like forgiveness, around things like journaling, around, kind of what do we need to release? There's so much happening in the world right now. People are going through so much. People are releasing so much in terms of ancestral contracts, karmic contracts, and so much is going on. I really do feel forgiveness is an important part of that. So I am sending you all so much love and light. If you're going through something, be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself and know that this too shall pass. This is a phase where we're all going through a rebirth. We're all learning and discovering who this version of ourselves is. So be kind to yourself. Sending you all so much love and light, and I'm going to hand over to Stacey to close out.
Thanks for being here, everybody. Another great episode. Reach out to us. We love hearing from you, love your feedback, and all the beautiful messages we get. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and just to close out, this podcast episode idea came from a DM that we received. Actually, I wasn't sure what this podcast episode was going to be about, and I got the message this morning, and I thought, well, you know what? Maybe that's perfectly timed. So we adjusted the topic based on that message. So if there's anything you want us to cover, then send us a DM. We love hearing from you. We love those ideas, suggestions. So please do reach out. Sending everyone so much love and light, and bye for now.